Hello and welcome to the Center for the Study of Organized Hate's panel discussion on human rights and the persecution of religious minorities. My name is Naila Mohammed. I'm the Director of Research for Pakistan and Afghanistan at the center. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that today's event is being recorded. We have the pleasure of hosting subject matter experts and activists Rabia Mahmood, Cecil Shane Chowdhury, and Jaya Jaggi, who provide insights into the systemic discrimination and violence directed towards religious minorities, particularly the Hindu and Christian communities in Pakistan. Our discussion will delve into the historical context that has shaped these issues, the role of digital platforms, the psychological and social impacts of such persecution, and the ongoing struggle for the fight for rights and recognition. We will begin with opening remarks from our panelists, starting with Rabia Mahmood, then Cecil, and then Jaya. Rabia, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. The speakers will have a few minutes to give introductions on their expertise and their subject. Rabia.
Hi, thank you, Naila, and thank you to my colleagues on the panel and to everyone attending. This is an important discussion. It's unfortunately a discussion we have to keep on having, and we're forced into having in Pakistan, but it's important to have these platforms. So I'm going to be quickly speaking about the issue of freedom of religion and belief, but mostly from the perspective of the blasphemy law and the violence, primarily because we have seen a spike in violence and also a spike in the cases of blasphemy law in Pakistan. Pakistan's human rights record remains deeply flawed, marred by its draconian blasphemy laws, which have fueled widespread abuse for decades. The blasphemy law is basically a draconian colonial era law. It covers various provisions. And I'm going to speak about it, not just the blasphemy law, which is 295 ABC, but also 298 ABC. These are religiously discriminatory laws. And 298 ABC specifically address the Ahmadiyya, but 295 ABC are laws which carry provisions. One of its provisions carries the death penalty. And they are but primarily tilted towards protection of the majoritarian Islam's concepts. And the provision which carries the death penalty is the 1295C is about the insult to the last prophet of Islam. Then there is there is the insult to the holy books and also the Quran, and also the insult to religion overall. However, these laws disproportionately target religious minorities and minority Muslim sects. For instance, the Shia or subsects of the Shia, often exploited by the majority to maintain religious supremacy. The state's culture of impunity empowers the defenders of blasphemy laws and perpetrators of hate and violence in the name of Sunni Islam, which is the majoritarian Islam in Pakistan. Pakistan is 96.5% or plus people who are Muslims, and even including the Shia, that's not a very big minority within the Muslim sects. So the religious minorities, or people who've been declared the religious minorities legally, is a make up for a very small percentage of population, but they are disproportionately targeted in the cases of blasphemy, and also when it comes to mob violence and targeted direct attacks. The environment.
Rabia, I
Yeah.
believe I did you a disservice by not introducing you properly, and I jumped right over to you because I was overly excited. So if I may interject, I can give your introduction. I I do apologize. I
Okay.
just wanted to let the audience know and give you a background on our subject matter experts. I was so excited to have Rabia here, and Cecil and Jaya. I forgot to mention that Rabia Mahmood is a researcher, a multimedia journalist, and a documentary filmmaker specializing in religiously motivated violence, state repression, and reprisals against human rights defenders. She's documented the impact of religious extremism on Pakistan's minorities through video writing, And as a former South Asia researcher for Amnesty International, she investigated hate crimes against refugees and asylum seekers in Sri Lanka. She is an expert on the persecution of religious and ethnic minorities. Rabia has collaborated with Frontline Defenders, the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, the International Center for Journalists, among many other organizations. And she's currently the managing editor of New Wave Global, a digital portal, and hosts podcasts on social justice issues. So just to give you a background on Rabia, and once she's done, I'll give you a background on Cecil. Thank you, Rabia, and I do apologize.
No worries. I hope our whoever's watching it is can retain some of this information. I also deep dived into the introduction and did not read your messages on the side. It's okay. Yes, so now people have a context on as to why I'm fixating on the violence part of this issue. We have discriminatory laws, but we also have a weaponization of these laws in Pakistan to a very, very violent degree. And that's the key issue that we've been dealing with for the past 6, 7 years. And we are seeing an escalation and spike in in this environment. And so to get back to what I was saying, that there is an environment of hostility, which is of course enabled by the blasphemy laws and the strengthening and weaponizing of these laws. And this environment of hostility has led to lynchings, targeted killings, the desecration of minority worship places, grave vandalism, and the destruction of countless lives due to these fabricated cases. My colleague Cecil and Jaya will get into the details of how they impact the everyday life of specific minorities as well. But they kind of have created this environment where everyone is scared in the country. I would repeat that minorities are disproportionately impacted, but everyone lives under this climate of fear. Journalists, political dissidents, women's rights activists, politicians, even everyone is scared of what an accusation or an allegation or even the whiff of a blasphemy can do to someone's life and career. And despite Pakistan's international obligations, the state, politicians, and law enforcement have consistently failed to protect citizens from religiously motivated violence or ensure religious freedoms. And for many, the only refuge from this persecution is asylum abroad. It's not very uncommon to see people getting forcibly displaced within Pakistan and having to relocate within Pakistan, specifically people from the Christian community, the Hindus, and the Ahmadiyya, because of such acts of violence in the name of Islam, or when someone's accused of blasphemy, or a community or someone is accused of blasphemy and the entire community is disrupted in that area. But then the ultimate refuge is asylum abroad, and that we're seeing again more and more of in the country. And we are also seeing an increase in the acts of mob violence and lynchings in Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Sindh. And recently we saw a very gory act of violence, which I will speak about later, in Balochistan as well. And again, the state apparatus has failed to hold mob participants to account due to their affiliation with sectarian and Islamist parties and outfits. And a blasphemy convict has never been executed by the state in Pakistan, but the courts continue to sentence people and accuse them to death. And despite landmark rulings by the court, like Supreme Court, the such rulings and their enforcement the enforcement hasn't really trickled down, and such precedents have not really made any impact on how such cases are ruled by or decided by the lower courts, and how the law enforcement sort of prosecutes such cases. And religious minorities again are subjected to arbitrary detentions and cases and arbitrary extrajudicial killings also because of accusations of blasphemy. So this is the overall situation of Pakistan when it comes to FORB, and which is also now linked to violations of freedom of expression. And the blasphemy accusation and this kind of it has now transitioned or trickled to or moved to the online space, which of course I'll be speaking about later. But I also want to quickly, if I have a few seconds, want to speak of the fact that the state, the Pakistani state security establishment, which includes the military and intelligence agencies, and the mainstream political parties and others, are increasingly also using this are using this law to stifle dissent and control freedoms, but also they're playing the religion card in politics, which again sets terrible precedents and also just takes this whole issue on a very larger mainstream level. And we have seen creation of sectarian outfits, creation of political parties, or a legitimate cover of a political party being given to thug like sectarian collectives. And those are who play the politics of blasphemy primarily, and that was only done to control political situation in Pakistan, to control or impact elections in the country. And but what it's led to is a very widespread culture of extreme sectarian hate and politics of blasphemy. And then there's a political party called the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, which is a newer phenomena, which has taken the organized violence and organized hate and incitement in the country to a very wider scale, and on to a different to a different league altogether. And this political party was created just to control elections and topple governments, and now we see its impact on such a mainstream, such a widespread grassroots level in the country, across the country, when it comes to the issue of blasphemy, false accusations, mob violence, and lynchings. I will get a bit more into this later on, but this was a quick intro into where we stand with regards to FORB in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Rabia. I appreciate that insight. Cecil, I'll give an introduction to you, but what popped out in my brain is that you said to the audience, no one has been executed for blasphemy laws yet, but we've seen a great deal of mob lynchings and violence and targeted attacks and assassination towards religious minorities. And that's become worrisome. And although they are not executed by the state, they are executed by the population. Cecil, thank you so much for being here today. Cecil Shane Chaudhary has been the South Asia Deputy Team Leader for Christian Solidarity Worldwide, CSW, in the United Kingdom for the past 3 years. CSW is an organization that advocates for the right to freedom of religion or belief for all. Prior to this role, Cecil served as the Executive Director of the Catholic Mission for Justice and Peace, CCJP, in Pakistan for over 7 years. Being a Pakistani Christian himself and having experienced discrimination firsthand, Cecil felt led to raising his voice against the atrocities committed towards marginalized and vulnerable communities. Cecil is a former Minority Fellow from the Minority Fellowship Program at the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. He has extensively advocated for on international levels on the discrimination against religious minorities in Pakistan. Thank you so much for being here today, Cecil.
Thank you, Naila, and thank you to the Center for the Study of Organized Hate. And also thanks to Rabia and Jaya, my fellow panelists, for being on this panel and sharing your expertise and your thoughts on this particular issue. I'll just share in my introduction a bit about although Rabia has already mentioned about the issues that come under freedom of religion or belief, or the right to freedom of religion or belief in Pakistan. So I'll share a little more with regards to the Christian community and what sort of issues and challenges they are facing. Now, in order to understand that, we also need to know that the Christian community accounts for about 1.6% of the total population of Pakistan, which is, these are data according to the government with the census that they have done. However, civil society organizations in Pakistan believe that this estimate is much higher, the percentage, and roughly estimated at around 4 to 5 million Christians in the country. Now, another aspect of that is that majority of the Christian community are economically marginalized in Pakistan. They do not have proper access to healthcare, adequate education opportunities, and work opportunities in the country. So they are already suppressed and struggling in that situation that they are living under. Now, Rabia mentioned about the blasphemy laws, and I think that when you look at the challenges and the issues that Christians or even religious minorities in the country face, right at the top of the list are the blasphemy laws, coupled with this growing trend of mob lynchings and mob attacks that we witness. To share a bit of data with you, in this year from our partners in Pakistan, which is the Center for Social Justice, from January to November in this year, there have been at least 258 cases of blasphemy accusations that have been reported. Out of these, 223 were against Muslims, 12 were against Christians, one against the Hindu community, and 18 were against the Ahmadiyya. But I also want to mention here that, as Rabia said, the minorities are disproportionately affected. In those 223 Muslims, majority of them are against the Shia community. So there's a sectarian minority also group that is being affected by these blasphemy accusations, which we must also take into account. In this year alone, we have seen 11 extrajudicial killings that have taken place. And just recently, there's been one just day before yesterday that occurred against the Ahmadiyya community. If we look at the data of mob attacks historically, we also will understand that majority of the attacks, mob attacks that have taken place on settlements and neighborhoods have been against the Christian community. Now, to just enumerate some, in 1997, there was the mob attack on Shantinagar in the district of Khanewal in the Punjab province. In 2005, there was the mob attack in Sangla Hill. In 2009, there was the Gojra riots in which 8 people lost their lives. In 2013, you had the Joseph Colony in Lahore, where over 116 houses were burnt down by the mob. Then in 2014, the gruesome act of, if that occurred, a mob attack in Kot Radhakishan with the couple Shama and Shazad, who were burnt alive by throwing them into the brick kiln. And just to mention here that Shama was expecting her 4th child at the time she was pregnant. And the 3 young children of Shama and Shazad had to watch this gruesome attack in front of their eyes. They watched their parents being burnt alive in the brick kiln, or the furnace of the brick kiln that they were thrown into by the mob. Then you have the Jaranwala attack, which took place last year in August, which was in this near the city of Faisalabad, where over 21 churches and several houses were ransacked and burnt. And this year, in the month of May, we in the city of Sargodha, shoe factory owner Nazir Masih, or Lazar Masih, was attacked by a mob. He was beaten with iron rods and bricks. And about a week later, he succumbed to his injuries in that mob attack. So when you look at all these mob attacks, they are all happening against the Christian, most of them are happening against the Christian community. Now, one of the reasons why this is growing is because the state has not held these mobs to account. The writ of the state has not been imposed. They don't hold the perpetrators of these attacks responsible or set a precedence. And this allows that space to grow. We also see, another area that I want to touch upon is the root causes, what we believe as the root causes of intolerance in Pakistan, religious intolerance in Pakistan. And that stems from our education policy, our curriculum, the biased policy, the biased curriculum, and the hateful and biased content that you find within the textbooks that are taught in colleges and schools across the country. It creates this mindset of exclusion, or the lack of respect and recognition for the presence of the diverse ethnic and religious groups that exist within Pakistan. So when you're not going to teach young children about the diversity that Pakistan has to offer, how will they regard or respect all these other groups within the country? There is an exclusionary approach where we've seen minority heroes being removed from the textbooks to serve only one particular narrative of the majority religion in Pakistan, whereas the minority community has contributed in so many areas: healthcare, education, defense services, judiciary, political arena, but those are not recognized in our textbooks. And that mindset has evolved into allowing space for other abuses to take place. And I'll let Jaya elaborate on that. But I just want to mention the issue of abductions and forced conversions and forced marriages of Christian and Hindu women and minor girls, which has started to grow and is also a very worrisome issue that is taking place in Pakistan. And then when it comes to the Christians, again, you have the discrimination at the workplace. They are this issue we've been raising since 2015, where job advertisements for menial jobs like for sweepers and sanitary workers very clearly states, the advert states that only Christian minorities are eligible to apply for this job. Why are only Christians singled out for such jobs is another question. And we've been raising that issue that the government needs to address this particular issue on an immediate basis, because it stigmatizes the community also and creates that mindset that they're only capable of doing this sort of work. And last issue that I'll touch upon before I stop over here is, that if you want to address the issues and the challenges faced by the religious minorities, then the minorities need a stronger and a more effective voice in parliament. The minorities face political marginalization, wherein they are selected into parliament, and not very few of them in this election that we've seen are able to contest the elections on a general seat. And because they come through that selective selection process rather than an election process, they lack the mandate of their voters, and they lack the strength or confidence to speak up about those issues. They then tend to tread the party line because the party has done them a favor of bringing them through that reserved option that is available. So that's something that also to create stronger voices within parliament, we have to, the minorities must be elected so that they can speak up for their issues. In the interest of time, I'll stop over here. There are a lot of other issues, but I think I've just touched upon the most pressing issues that we need to look at, and I'm happy to discuss further later in this program. Thank you so much, Nala.
Thank you, Cecil. I want to dive deeper into that later on. I'd like to just give Jaya the platform, and especially want to talk about how these seats are appointed and they oftentimes don't accurately represent the voices of the community at hand. But let's turn over to someone else from the community. Jaya, thank you so much for being here. Jaya Jaggi comes from a family with a beautiful combination of Hindu and Sikh beliefs. She's a human rights activist and a peace builder with expertise in advocacy, preventing and countering violent extremism, freedom of religious belief, the interreligious dialogue. She has worked with national and international organizations, including the National Commission for Minorities, IDS UK, UNFPA, and UNOY, and serves on the board of the Forum for Dignity Initiatives. Jaya is a member of the Minority Women Forum and People's Commission for Minorities' Rights. She's been a part of 2 researchers on forced faith conversions, and she's leading a collective, She Matters, primarily working for minority women in Pakistan. Jaya has been involved in advocacy with the EU, humanitarian relief, and community engagement. She's serving currently as the Director of Programs at ISYD for Youth Engagement through Art and Theater. Thank you so much for being here, Jaya. I appreciate your time, and it's really nice to have a young voice on the panel who will be able to speak to the issues that Cecil and Rabia brought up. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nana. Firstly, thank you so very much for trusting in me. It's indeed an honor to share on behalf of the community, but rather than being it an honor, it's probably very overwhelming while I was listening to Cecil and Rabia, and I wish we did not have to hold this space for this kind of conversation, but unfortunately the situation is not good and we have to, and I really appreciate all those people who are putting in their efforts, their concerns for promoting human rights in general and minority rights in particular. Sharing with my own experiences of this year on August 11, National Minority Day, we organized the Minority Rights March to present 11 demands to the government for protecting our rights. As we all shared flyers to mobilize support, asking our allies to join us for the protest on National Minority Day, a coordinated social media campaign that falsely labeled our march as blasphemous. It all started around social media. Even a letter by those people who come from a religiously extremist group, they even submitted this letter to the city administration, warning them that if this event will be allowed by the city administration to happen, they are all responsible for the consequences. This campaign actually created fear, discouraged many of our participants who did not show up for our protest outside Islamabad Press Club. While I myself went to the city administration to get the NOC, we could not. Even they told me, we have a letter by another group against you that if we allow you to hold this space, we all will be responsible. And these are the instances where you realize that even the people who are supposed to protect you just come to such groups who perpetuate violence, hate. Though we did not get the NOC, we still gathered outside the press club. It was, I would say, probably around 100 people across the city, coming from minority groups, our allies from the religious majority group. At the venue, a group that is linked to a religious seminary, they arrived in a van that had black tinted windows. And the moment we saw that van coming towards us, we were really scared because we thought now this is a mob that is going to attack us. Luckily, the police intervened. They did not allow them to come to us, but the police immediately urged us to leave. And every one of us had to leave that space for our safety. This entire incident then reflects the immense barriers minorities face when they peacefully advocate for their rights, gathering on National Minorities Day that is there to honor their contributions. Every year, a significant number of Hindus migrate from Pakistan. According to statistics, they once used to make 16% of the population, but today that number has dropped to just 1.8%. Ever wondered why? Probably the answer lies in the daily struggles we all endure, from discrimination in schools and workplaces to hate speech in our educational curriculum. Many Hindus live in constant fear of blasphemy charges, even myself. This year, when I had a conflict with the shopkeeper around my laptop, I did not argue. I had this innate fear. What if I say something to him and he just put a blasphemy charge on me in this market? Whether it happens or not, this is the fear that I carry every other day while I am in a public space. And these all arise even from minor conflicts. To avoid persecution, most of the Hindus have adopted Muslim names to hide their religious identity in the province of Punjab, as well as in. Majority of the Hindu population is struggling socially, economically. They are mostly involved in bonded labor or menial jobs. They're working as tenant farmers, sharecroppers, that even hinder their meaningful participation in socioeconomic political spaces and even to pursue the cases against forced faith conversions. Most of the time, parents just withdraw these cases just because they're already working as tenant farmers on the same land who are actually the accused ones. Just last month, while I was researching around forced faith conversions, I visited a community and there was a young girl hardly studying in 4th class. She told me that in her school in 2024, it is not allowed for Hindu children to touch the glass of water that is placed by the school. And I asked her, have you not shared this with your teacher that that's not right? And she said that these are the instructions from our teacher. And I told her that you should raise wires, you should do something around it. And she said, I'll carry my own bottle. That tells you that rather than raising our voice, rather than putting that systematic change, we prefer to change our path to burden ourselves. And she said, I'll be carrying my own water bottle rather than asking them to make these changes or not to discriminate us. Last year, while I was doing a campaign around census, mobilizing and sensitize minority community to share their religious identity to the ones who come to their door asking for their identity for census that was happening at national level, so that proper and right budget is allocated for them. I told my mom that someone from the government might come to the door, they ask us, they might not ask for our religion, but since it is for census, you need to make sure that you tell them that we are not Muslims so that they do not put in our put us in that Muslim column so that we can see what is the actual percentage of Hindu community. And my mother refused. My mother comes from a sensitized family. She knows her daughter is an activist, and she refused that I'll not reveal our religion. And I asked her, Mom, why? And she said, you never know what kind of people would be there. They might know there's one family living in this town, and they might do something that's not right. I literally had to convince, but she had this innate fear. Meanwhile, incidents of forced conversions are alarmingly frequent. Hindu girls are abducted, raped, forcefully married to their abductors, and there is no justice. Rather, those people who write about these cases on social media, raise a voice on any of the platforms, they are threatened. They are asked to either leave the country, or they're threatened that they have to stop even advocating for it. While HRCP reports over around 1,000 cases annually, including Hindu, Sikh, and Christian women. Also, Sikh women are not even allowed to get education just because of this fear. Most of the cases sometimes that happen in Sindh, the fear comes to Punjab province, and this remains innate. You'll hardly find these women in public spheres. And just quickly mentioning about the structural issues that we have. In 2020, National Commission for Minorities was formed, but it had no legal powers, no autonomy of decision-making, where the people from Islamic Ideology Council were there, who were influencing the space. And even when anti-forced conversion bill was proposed, it was rejected. And why so? Because there was a pressure from religious extremist groups. Even when the government announced that there would be a temple being built in Islamabad, there was a coordinated campaign that this money is Muslims' money. There should not be a temple by the government being built in federal capital. And even people went to that place. They started giving azans over there just to make sure that this place is now very clean, pure, and no temple could be formed over here. And if we talk about political representation, just forget about it. Because people who are supposed to be representatives of minorities, they are mostly handpicked favorites of the decision makers, with little to no interest in addressing the struggles of minority communities. If I have to keep on speaking about the issues, probably I would spend the entire day in mentioning what the challenges are. But probably through regular conversations, we might manage this. And I hope that in future, we don't have to hold such space to advocate for the rights of religious minorities in Pakistan. Over to you, Nyala.
Thank you so much, Jaya. I'm going to start with a series of questions and also let the audience know that they can start sending their questions into the chat. And we will try our best to answer. But I was going to go to Rabia first. However, you said something, Jaya, that compelled me to want to ask you this question. You said that a lot of Hindus adopt Muslim names in order to avoid bullying or blasphemy laws or, persecution. And I thought to myself, this might work the opposite way too, that if they pose as a Muslim while being a Hindu, that can ultimately work against them as well as it does oftentimes with the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Can you talk to me about that? How is the Hindu community then observing their faith behind closed doors? Or are they just fearful to mention that they are Muslim to the majority community?
Just sharing an example. So I was making my account on InDrive. That's a cab that you use to commute. I made that account not with my real name. That was a Muslim name. It's because I was just fearful that there might come someone who just sees that this name seems like a Christian name or a Muslim name. My brother's name is very evident. It makes you understand that this is a Hindu name. I never asked him to book a cab for me because the fear is innate. And while Sister was sharing about how there had been certain cases, last year when one such case happened, I booked a cab at around 11 p.m. in Lahore, going from bus stop to a Christian seminary. And I was really fearful because sometimes Jaya seems like a Christian name. And now at that time, I was going to a Christian seminary and I was of the view, you never know what kind of individuals are there. And then even in the last few days, such incident of blasphemy was already happened. And I just had this innate fear, number one. So when you see this is my own example. Number one, I'm an activist, I work around it, and I really don't want anyone to know about my identities, my addresses. Probably I'm being very vulnerable to share this information over here. And then, for example, all those people that I have been mentioning, that many of my friends living in South Punjab, they have Muslims name. It's just so that they can integrate within the communities and leaving behind their own identities of being a Hindu. When someone has a Hindu name, there is discrimination not only with the name, but with their attire as well. For example, women who would be having Sindhu, a Sikh. uh, I remember an incident where there is a child at my house and he wears that turban that Sikh wears, and he went to the school and kids made fun of him. And then they took the child from that school, they got him admitted into another school. But the cycle remained constant because people were not sensitive or sensitized enough. It's a constant struggle. So it's not just names, but it's your attire. It's about all those symbols that you are wearing that expose you or make or tell people that you belong to a certain group, particularly when the society is highly volatile in terms of politics, in terms of religion. This is how I see. Also, in terms of celebrations, I rented a house in Islamabad, and the woman who was our landlord, landlady rather, she came to our house and she said, look, I don't want you to do any of your religious practices in this house. And she mentioned that I don't have an issue, but neighbors might mind that. We even if she had not said it, we probably would not be doing anything, but she might be expecting that we might be doing some arty over there. But that was the explicit remark coming from her that you should not be doing it over here. And yes, these are the practices that most of the time, whenever we used to rent a house in Islamabad, I had this fear that, okay, we are coming to see a house, they might give it to us, but the moment we will be coming to sign the agreement, they might see our names, and then they'll be like, oh, you're not a Muslim family. And that's why after 1 to 2 experiences, we made sure that we tell the agent beforehand, that tell them that we are not Muslim. And also because there's a negative connotation with Hindus, not just with Christians or Sikhs, but particularly with Hindus. So when you tell someone that, oh, I'm a Hindu, there is a particular stereotype that they have in their mind. And that's one of the reasons that we used to tell them beforehand. And we knew that, okay, when we will be telling them, they'll not be allowing us. And if someone allows you, they do not appreciate that you do any of your religious practices, and we just don't do it. I hope it answers you. Over to you, Nya.
No, it's mostly, from what I gathered, it's safety and security and trying to bypass discrimination and basically integrate into society where oftentimes religious minorities are ostracized subconsciously. It's very sad. Rabia, thank you so much for that. It's very emotional. I can see the emotion in your face, and it's terrible that the minority community has to go through this. Rabia, I wanted to come to you initially and ask you, historically, Pakistan's blasphemy laws have been misused for personal grievances and to target members of minority religious groups. However, there's a rising tendency to apply these laws to imprison individuals for their social media posts. And in March this year, a court in Pakistan sentenced a 22-year-old to death on charges of blasphemy over WhatsApp messages that reportedly contained derogatory words about the Prophet Muhammad and his wives. Can you speak to me in the audience about the intersection of blasphemy accusations in the online space with religiously motivated violence offline?
Thank you, Naila. So there are two things. We've seen a rise in cases of blasphemy accusations and fabricated cases of blasphemy against everyone, but also the religious minorities, primarily the Christians and the Ahmadiyya, and also the Shia, which is like within the not a designated legal minority, but a minority sect of Islam impacted very significantly by this situation. So with the rise of the internet and access to internet and social media platform, we've seen a spike in these accusations. It's kind of like given this opportunity to whoever wants to out of animosity or like organized groups. They're just there is a fabrication element, there is a trapping element, there is also a deliberate deliberate sort of going after people, settling personal scores element to that through electronic communication and social media platforms. So there is one that is that. That's why we see a rise in the cases of 295 ABC, 298 ABC, the blasphemy provisions under the Pakistan Penal Code with the Pakistan Electronic Crime Act, which carries these provisions which have been misused to accuse others of blasphemy, primarily Section 11, which is about hate speech, but also Section 9 and 10. And that's why, for instance, I will quickly give you, at the moment, there are about more than 740 prisoners of blasphemy across Pakistan in jails. And these prisoners are, this is an official data, right? This is the government, these are the government figures. And as of October, at least 643 people in Punjab, because that's the province where all the violence and accusations are concentrated, and at least 87 people in Sindh. The NCHR, National Commission of Human Rights report, says 120 people, but the last data I saw was 87 people in Sindh around July, August. So that's a number, but it sort of all adds up to, and 60 plus people in KP and a couple in Balochistan, but all adds up. And I was just quickly looking at the report from Sindh, based on the government figures, is that at the moment, at least 40 people till July, August, the data from July, August showed that like at least 40 people were accused of blasphemy under Pakistan Penal Code's other provisions, and 47 people. So the number is like more than double, were accused of blasphemy with its Pika intersection, 47 people. And so the 40 in Sindh, which were just the blasphemy accusations or 295 ABC, did not carry 295C in the as many cases of 295C, which carries the death penalty, the provision of blasphemy law, which carries the death penalty. But when it came to Pika cases, majority of the Pika cases had 295C in the FIR, in the police first information report, which is registered by the police. So I hope it's not too confusing for people who are watching. What I'm trying to say is that the accusations in the online space, they are on the rise. They're almost the double or more than double of the accusation of blasphemy, which are offline for offline conduct, which are again can be fabricated cases. But in online cases, the scary part is that you have the anti-terrorism charges, but you also have the provision of the blasphemy law 295C, which carries the death penalty. Right, so it's so the cases which are of which come under Pika, which are for online committing online blasphemy, which could be through like a phone text, a WhatsApp message, or like a message on Facebook, or a post on Facebook, or tweet, or TikTok posts. Because we have a Christian man accused of blasphemy or sharing blasphemous contents under on TikTok. Around the Jaramwala this year, in context of the Jaramwala case. So that's what's very worrying when it comes to just the kind of teeth the online blasphemy cases have. We have seen an investigation by the special branch which says that now more and more a very organized group of perpetrators is going after people to trap them in cases of online blasphemy. That too includes people from the religious minorities. And religious minorities, again, otherwise are disproportionately targeted when we look at their population. So that is one thing. And the other thing is that how the internet is used to spread disinformation with regards to blasphemy, because the blasphemy accusation is also a crisis of disinformation in the country. And while the government will speak about, on when extreme cases of violence have occurred, like the Jaramwala incidents, which was like more than 30 cases, 30 churches, registered and unregistered, of churches were attacked in Jaramwala district of the churches of the Christian, various Christian denominations, and more than 85 households in multiple settlements in Jaramwala and around. Cecil can correct my numbers if they are not accurate. I'm going by more like at least, right? And when that happened, we again saw the way the social media was used to spread disinformation. So, people, the government can speak about disinformation when it comes to political issues, and when it comes to sort of political domestic instability, when it comes to opposition parties, but not when it comes to blasphemy. But it's also, it's a matter of fake news, disinformation crisis. So in Jaranwala, we saw Facebook and TikTok specifically, and also Twitter, YouTube to a degree being used by people to spread the false allegation against two Christian brothers of having accused blasphemy. So the blasphemy was not accused, the allegation was not because of what they had done online, but then social media was quickly picked up. And by 10 a.m., it started early morning. And by 10 a.m. on August 16 in 2023, we saw it spread like wildfire. And I remember just going online and seeing these cable news networks by citizen journalists, correspondents, local correspondents that also provide news to mainstream cable news networks, using their platforms online to literally spread falsehoods with regards to accusations, right? And then we saw like a lot of sharing of various videos by the far right groups on YouTube and otherwise. But the way these posts were shared, they were in thousands, the interactions, 30 plus thousand interactions on one post, which I was looking at. And the National Commission of Human Rights then came up with an initial report and said that there were 1 million social media posts, which I feel like is very believable. Majority were taken off, but if you go online, I have links to some of the posts on Facebook and TikTok. You can still find those hashtags of incitements and whatnot, and it kind of like unfolded over the course of 2 days. And we saw that Jaranwala was a day-long assault on the Christians, and people were displaced, and then of course they couldn't come back to their houses. There was vandalism and whatnot, and Cecil would speak in detail of what all happened. So that's one thing. Then we see these very organized collectives which have been going after religious minorities initially, and some bloggers, and also agnostics and atheists in Pakistan and online space. And then we've seen these people financially benefiting from becoming professional accusers of blasphemy. And there are multiple collectives. Now we have a special branch report, but the media had started raising this in 2012, that these people are coming after us. So we also need to like listen to what the minorities, all these groups, are my colleagues here on the panel and otherwise have been telling us for years, right? That these collective groups with individuals who have linked to militant outfits and some not, are using blasphemy accusations to trap people, destroy their lives, and also to make money. And then we have another very troubling issue that we have, like a trend that we are seeing, and I think it has to be mentioned, is the role of the law enforcement, like the Federal Investigation Agency, and also the lawyers collective, the far right lawyers collective, who benefit from this and who operate in a very organized way to accuse people of blasphemy, and to also just kind of like go in public and speak about it in a very, very proud way. So we have the incitement by the groups like TLP and others. Then we have these law enforcement groups, which are like the cybercrime wing of federal investigation agencies, who, and like I'm saying, the religious minorities have been raising the complicity between these various like groups for years now. It's just that now we are seeing that everyone is impacted by it. People from the majoritarian Islam also, right? The Sunnis and others. So it's kind of spreading like wildfire in the country, and the youth are increasingly at risk from every group, not to take away from what is happening to the religious minorities. And these are the two issues which we're like now seeing increasing. And also on the issue of TLP and organized violence and hate, another incident which I want to like speak about, two cases, is an accusation of WhatsApp group blasphemy against a young Christian man, Patras Masih, which was in 2022 or 2021, 2022, if I'm now again. There's so many cases. And the Patras Masih case was very specific because that is when we saw, it was earlier, but then he was given death penalty later on, is when the Tehreek-Labbaik Pakistan was coming into its own and going after people. And I feel like they tested the way how they carry out organized sort of hate and offline and online and offline coordination of that violence on the minorities first, right, before the TLP became what it became. So Patras Masih case was like this test case that we saw in Lahore when they were the Tehreek Labbaik Ya Rasulullah. No one really knew their exact name, and they were going after, just like there were groups going after the Ahmadiyya, the same way that these groups went after Christians. And this young Christian cleaning worker who was trapped in this case, and there was this immense violence and threat to the community. So the community got displaced. FIA tortured Patras's cousin, the Federal Investigation Agency, to extract a confession from him of his cousin's alleged blasphemy. And then it became this like mammoth of a case. So we also saw like how these groups can threaten and blackmail state law enforcement authorities and the state authorities in a way that they have to appease. And again, an issue that we are increasingly seeing. We saw that with Jaranwala also. We saw this appeasement in the messaging of the police as well, right? The increasingly appeasement in how they speak to the mob, in how they are kind of like, engaging with religious groups. So that was one case. And then Jaranwala being this one incident. And of course, we've seen women being accused of blasphemy online, this young Christian mother for blasphemy on via WhatsApp. So, and of its intersection with how offline violence is carried out, we now see, even when it comes to organized violence, women participating in incitement offline based off of what has happened. And then the Sargodha case of the Lazar Masih incident was just like one such example, which Cecil spoke about. We saw women inciting violence and riling up and endorsing the lynching, which was happening in front of them in Sargodha, Punjab. So these are like, that's where the intersection of internet and offline violence comes in. And that's how the online sort of, cases of blasphemy in the online space are on the rise. And I hope that kind of like explain how the spike is taking place and how people are increasingly vulnerable, but primarily the minorities.
No, absolutely. And in the question box, we also have people bringing up, online vigilante groups that I wish we could get more into. There was, the Legal Commission on Blasphemy Pakistan, the LCBP, and one of our audience members also mentioned another group of lawyers that oftentimes defend representing the complaints in courts across the country. So I wish we had more time. We only do have a few more minutes, and I wanted to get into questions with Cecil. Cecil, you mentioned the mob attacks on the Christian settlements in Jaranwala and Sargodha in 2023 and 2024. Can you explain what the long-term effects or challenges do? What does the community face? What are the challenges that they face? What happens in the aftermath of such violent events?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think first of all, after such a mob attack, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. After, when such mob attacks occur, the first thing that happens is a trust deficit develops within the community against the majority Muslim community and also with the authorities, which only increases if it is left unattended. Then there is the trauma of the attacks that haunts the affected families. Who will address that trauma that the children or even the adults had to endure when they saw their houses and the churches being burnt by the mob? That who's going to do that trauma counseling? It's the state's responsibility now. Over here, the state would say, "Oh, we rebuilt those houses, we monetarily compensated the affected families," but in the long term, civil society is not equipped enough to address that trauma and to do that trauma counseling or to reduce the trust deficit that the community has now developed in their minds against the majority community and against the mob, because of the mob attack. It's the state's responsibility to also to intervene and address these issues. Now, there were examples that we saw out of the Jaranwala attack, and that where many children were unable to resume their schooling again. There were reports that Christian children were being bullied in school, or they were taken out of school because they were accused that, oh, you people committed blasphemy. many of the community members were unable to start their own businesses after the attack on Jallianwala. Some of them who were working were thrown out of their jobs, terminated on the pretext that, oh, a person from your community had committed blasphemy and therefore you're not welcome over here. So, now we also need to note over here that both the accused in Jallianwala, Rocky and Raja Masi, they had been accused of committing blasphemy. They had not been convicted. But that is something that the mob does not see, or even sometimes the wider public does not see. The mere allegation is enough to assume that they are guilty of committing blasphemy, and that's where, unfortunately, we stop. Then even, both these brothers, Rocky and Raja Masi, were acquitted some months later of this of the blasphemy accusation, but they're not safe anymore in Pakistan, and they don't have the resources even to relocate somewhere within Pakistan. So they are at the mercy of either the community or someone else who may be able to try to help them. But what happens? Now, leads to another phenomenon which I will, speak on, and then I will stop in the interest of time. But that phenomenon is that when a mob attack of this kind takes place, not just the people of Janawala or Sargoda or Joseph Colony get directly affected. Indirectly, it instills a fear amongst the wider Christian community anywhere in Pakistan that this has happened. And as in dire circumstances, they have no choice but to then try to flee the country to places like Thailand and Sri Lanka and Malaysia and Dubai, and try to seek asylum in a third country from there. It's not. We all know the miseries and the challenges that they face in those countries that they go to. It doesn't help. And I could just quote two examples. There's Stephen Massey, the case of Stephen Massey, who is abroad trying to seek asylum because of this fact. There's the Savan Massey, who was accused in the Joseph Colony case, again, who is waiting, and they wait for years. Their children can't get education in these countries. They can't work over there, so they are literally out of the frying pan and into the fire. And I think I would stop over there in the interest of time. But I just want to sum up, this particular situation of freedom of religion or belief in Pakistan. And I think the periods of constitutional discrimination that our country has passed through has led to institutional discrimination. And because the state never checked that institutional discrimination, it has transformed into societal discrimination, or rather persecution, which has gone beyond the minorities now, and it is an overall national issue of religious intolerance. So that's just some of my thoughts on the long-term impacts. Thank you, Nala.
Thank you so much. It is the stigma itself is more than enough to impact so negatively the entire community. It's difficult, and I am so sorry. We have just a few minutes left. I want to quickly, I'm not sure if you'll be able to do this, Jaya. I watched a TikTok video of you in which you explained how Pakistani school curriculum can often uplift Islam at the cost of belittling minority religions. Can you just briefly tell me, and I know this is not something to be answered briefly, but how does this impact how religious minorities are viewed in Pakistan when you have that type of curriculum in your schools?
While growing up, I never had the courage to say that I'm a Hindu. Because even in my mind, this term has a negative connotation. Probably in very recent years, I got this courage. And this tells you that how they are viewed. Last year, one of my relative, I was talking to them and I asked them that we follow Hindu and Sikh beliefs both. So whenever you are out, what do you tell people? And they said that we say I'm a Sikh. And I said, why? You're a Hindu. And he said, because when I tell them Hindu, they view me as more negative. Because every time in our curriculum, it was like Hindus are kafir, Hindus are our enemies. We got independence just because Muslims and Hindus cannot live together, or they were unable to live together. And that's the irony, that since childhood, you are telling a young kid that Hindus and Muslims, they are different, they cannot live together. And immediately when they grow up, they are with that belief. And then you're like, oh, it's diversity, we should we celebrating 11th August as National Minorities Day, kids really question that these are the people you had been telling me all my life that we got independence just because we could not live together. And then how can you justify integrating them, giving them equal rights? That's the narrative, rather the national narrative that needs a lot of acknowledgement or addressal rather. And that's where, even for example, the discrimination in constitution, whenever I tell my friends that I want to become a prime minister of the country, they say, hey, you cannot become because the constitution does not allow you. It means that I cannot even dream. So I don't even have this dream. Whether I become or not, that obviously becomes a side story. We could not touch a lot upon forced conversion, but through this platform, I do really want to mention that all those people who have been involved in forced conversion, particularly Miami 2, or Ayub Jan, or Miami 2, whose name is P. Abdul Haq. And when we say that all these people, in 2023, one of the Miami 2 was given party ticket by Pakistan People's Party. He was invited in 2024 by Sindh High Court to celebrate. All those people who are involved in these human rights violations are glorified by the state, and their videos are on social media just to glorify. This actually strengthens the hate narrative against religious minorities, and probably that's why most of us just don't have this courage of taking ownership of our own identities. Over to you now.
Thank you so much, Jaya. I am so sorry that we've run out of time. We have a series of questions that came in, and through your discussion, I hope that some of the questions from the audience were answered. Thank you again for joining us on this panel. We're looking forward to having you again soon. We're also working on various reports and panel discussions on minorities across South Asia. We have an upcoming panel discussion on how the international community can support girls' education in Afghanistan as well. Perhaps January 21st, we will solidify that date, but we invite you to join our mailing list and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, former Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok at CSOH. We regularly post about upcoming events, reports, and published pieces and collaborations, and we hope that you will join us. Thank you again so much for your participation in this discussion. I look forward to having you again. Signing off.